There is a very popular story about your brain. It says you're weak because your dopamine is broken. It says your phone destroyed your motivation. Your food destroyed your discipline. Your entertainment destroyed your ambition. Your modern life flooded your brain with pleasure chemicals until you became lazy, distracted, numb, and addicted to cheap stimulation. And the solution, we are told, is to detox. Detox from dopamine, fast from dopamine, reset dopamine, protect dopamine, optimize dopamine. It sounds scientific, it sounds serious, it sounds like someone finally explained why you can scroll for an hour but cannot focus for 10 minutes, why you can crave something you do not even enjoy, why you can feel overstimulated and empty at the same time. But there is a problem. Most of the online dopamine story is not neuroscience. It is mythology wearing a lab coat, and like most health mythology, it contains a piece of truth wrapped in a much larger distortion. The truth is that dopamine matters a lot. Dopamine is involved in motivation, learning, attention, habit formation, reward, movement, and the way your brain assigns importance to things. But the lie is that dopamine is just a chemical of pleasure. The lie is that pleasure is the enemy. The lie is that your brain is a bucket full of dopamine that modern life keeps draining or flooding. The lie is that the path back to health is to fear every rewarding experience as if enjoyment itself were biological corruption. That is not clarity, that is wellness mythology. And health is too important for mythology. So in this video we are going to dismantle the dopamine lie, not because compulsive scrolling is harmless, because junk food, gambling apps, porn, gaming loops, endless notifications, and hyper-engineered digital platforms cannot hijack attention. They can, but if the map is wrong, the solution will be wrong too. And the modern dopamine map is often wrong. The better question is not how do I avoid dopamine? The better question is what is my brain learning to want, and is that wanting serving the life I actually want to build? That is where the real conversation begins. Let's start with the phrase itself, dopamine detox. It is powerful marketing because it takes a familiar word, detox, and attaches it to a brain chemical people barely understand. A detox implies poison. Something entered your body. It contaminated you. Now you must cleanse it out. But dopamine is not poison. Dopamine is not a toxin. Dopamine is not a dirty chemical that modern life injected into your brain. It is a neurotransmitter, a messenger, a system your brain uses to regulate movement, motivation, learning, reward, attention, and many other functions. You do not want a dopamine-free brain. A dopamine-free brain is not a purified brain. It is a brain in serious trouble. That is the first distinction HaleSense wants you to remember. Dopamine is not the enemy. Dysregulated behavior is the issue. That distinction matters because a bad map creates bad guilt. A person spends 3 hours scrolling at night and wakes up exhausted. The dopamine myth says you are addicted to pleasure, you're weak, you have damaged your reward system, you need to eliminate stimulation. A better map says you may have a cue-driven habit loop, low friction access, emotional avoidance, sleep deprivation, stress, boredom, loneliness, and an environment designed to keep asking for one more minute. Those are not the same diagnosis. One gives you shame, the other gives you handles. Health judgment begins when you have handles. Now, why did dopamine become the villain? Because it sits near a real phenomenon. Many modern behaviors do feel compulsive. You open your phone to check one thing, 30 minutes disappear. You eat when you're not hungry. You watch another episode even though you are not enjoying the show. You refresh notifications even when you know nothing meaningful is there. You keep returning to a behavior that gives you less and less satisfaction. The experience is real, but the common explanation is too crude. People say dopamine equals pleasure. Modern life gives too much pleasure, so now normal life feels boring. There is some intuitive appeal there, but dopamine is not simply the molecule of liking. One of the most important distinctions in reward science is the distinction between liking and wanting. Liking is the pleasure of the experience. Wanting is the motivational pull toward it. Those two can overlap, but they can also separate. That separation explains a lot of modern behavior. You can want to check your phone without really liking what you find. You can want junk food without deeply enjoying the 10th bite. You can want to keep scrolling while feeling irritated numb, or bored. You can want stimulation even when the stimulation is no longer giving you meaningful pleasure. That is the trap, not pleasure. Compulsive wanting without real satisfaction. This is why the phrase cheap pleasure is often incomplete. Sometimes the issue is not that the behavior gives too much pleasure. Sometimes the issue is that it gives just enough uncertainty, novelty, cueing, and frictionless reward to keep wanting alive after liking has already faded. That is a darker and more precise map. You're not always chasing joy. Sometimes you're chasing the next prediction error, the next maybe, the next refresh, the next message, the next clip, the next tiny uncertainty. Maybe something interesting will happen. Maybe someone replied. Maybe the next video is better. Maybe the next post gives me that feeling I am looking for. Maybe the next bite changes my state. Maybe the next purchase makes me feel less stuck. This is not just pleasure, it is anticipation, it is salience, it is the brain learning, pay attention to this. This might matter. If something can repeatedly convince your brain that it might matter, it can dominate your attention even when it does not nourish your life. This brings us to a better explanation of dopamine. Dopamine is deeply involved in learning from rewards, especially when outcomes are better or worse than expected. If something unexpectedly good happens, the brain pays attention. Something expected fails to happen, the brain also pays attention. This is one reason variable rewards can be so powerful. Not every scroll gives you something interesting. Not every notification matters. Not every video is rewarding. Not every swipe is successful. Not every gamble pays off. But the uncertainty itself becomes part of the hook. The reward is not just a reward. The reward is the possibility. This matters because many modern attention traps are not built like simple pleasures. They are built like slot machines for attention. You do not know what the next piece of content will be. You do not know whether the next message will arrive. You do not know whether the next post will validate you, anger you, arouse you, scare you, or entertain you. Your brain keeps sampling, and because the cost of sampling is tiny, one thumb movement, one tap, one click, behavior becomes dangerously easy to repeat. This is where the dopamine myth gets one thing right and one thing wrong. It is right that modern environments can train attention and desire in unhealthy directions. It is wrong that the solution is to fear dopamine. The solution is to understand cue, reward, friction, repetition, and cost, because the problem is not that you have a reward system. The problem is that your reward system can be trained by environments that do not care about your health. Your phone does not care if you sleep. The algorithm does not care if you are anxious. The app does not care if you feel hollow afterward. The food product does not care if you overeat. The gambling mechanic does not care if you lose rent money. The outrage platform does not care if your nervous system is fried. The system cares about engagement. And engagement is not the same as health. Attention is not the same as nourishment. Wanting is not the same as well-being. That is the heart of the dopamine lie. Now, let's talk about resetting your dopamine. This is one of the most seductive claims online. Quit stimulation for a day. Quit your phone for a week. Quit pleasure for 30 days, then your brain resets. This has the emotional structure of a purification ritual. You were contaminated by modern pleasure. Now you enter the desert. You suffer. You emerge clean. That story is ancient, but being ancient does not make it scientific. Can taking breaks from compulsive behaviors help? Yes. Can reducing cues help? Yes. Can removing an app, blocking a site, changing routines, limiting notifications, or taking a weekend away from digital stimulation help you regain perspective? Absolutely. But that is not because you detoxed dopamine. It is because you changed behavior. You reduced cues, you interrupted loops, you increased friction, you gave your nervous system space. You made room for sleep, boredom, reflection, movement, and human contact. You stopped feeding one pathway for long enough to notice what it had been doing to you. That can be useful, but the mechanism matters, because if you misunderstand the mechanism, you may turn a sensible behavior change into a neurotic purity game. You start fearing music because it is stimulating. You start fearing exercise because it feels good. You start fearing sex, conversation, comedy, ambition, beauty, delicious food, and excitement because all of them involve reward. reward. That is not health. That is pleasure phobia with neuroscience language. And the body is not a morality test. The goal is not to become a monk of emptiness. The goal is to become harder to manipulate. There is a massive difference. Here is a HaleSense rule. Do not judge a behavior only by how stimulating it is. Judge it by what it trains, what it costs, and what it leaves behind. Hard workout is stimulating, but it may leave you stronger, calmer, and healthier over time. A deep conversation is stimulating, but it may leave you connected. A meaningful creative project is stimulating, but it may leave you more capable. Good food is rewarding, but in the right context, it can be part of health, culture, family, and pleasure without pathology. The question is not, does this produce dopamine? The question is this behavior teaching my brain to pursue? And then, what does it cost? Does it cost sleep? Does it cost attention? Does it cost self-respect? Does it cost money? Does it cost movement? Does it cost relationships? Does it cost the ability to tolerate normal effort? It costs the ability to sit with discomfort? That is the practical map. A behavior is not automatically bad because it is rewarding. A behavior becomes dangerous when it repeatedly trains you toward short-term wanting while degrading long-term capacity. That is why the same category can be healthy or unhealthy depending on pattern. Food is not the enemy, but compulsive eating can be harmful. Sexuality is not the enemy, but compulsive use of sexual stimulation can distort desire and attention. Entertainment is not the enemy, but endless passive consumption can hollow out agency. Technology is not the enemy, but technology without boundaries can colonize attention. Pleasure is not the enemy. Being trained away from the life you value is the enemy. Now let's identify the grift, because where there is confusion, there is a market. Dopamine panic creates customers. If people believe their motivation is broken because their dopamine is damaged, they become vulnerable to protocols, supplements, apps, courses, dopamine menus, extreme detox plans, productivity rituals, and influencer certainty. The sales pitch usually sounds like this. Your brain is overstimulated. Your dopamine receptors are fried. Normal life can no longer satisfy you. Follow this protocol and reclaim your discipline. Sometimes the advice hidden inside is ordinary and reasonable. Sleep better, exercise, stop scrolling at midnight, delay gratification, spend time outside, eat real meals, work before entertainment, do difficult things. Fine, but ordinary advice does not sell as well as a brain emergency, so the basics get dressed up as a neurological crisis. That is the wellness economy at work. It takes a real human struggle, distraction, compulsive habits, low motivation, emotional dysregulation, and turns it into an identity wound. You are dopamine damaged. That phrase is not just imprecise, it is morally loaded. It makes people feel biologically corrupted. And once people feel corrupted, they often buy purification. HaleSense rejects that frame. You are not a broken dopamine machine. You are a human being whose attention, habits, stress, sleep, environment, emotions, and incentives may be poorly arranged. That is less dramatic, but it is more useful. So what should you actually do? Let's build a better map. Not a dopamine detox, a dopamine literacy system. First, separate wanting from liking. Ask yourself, do I actually enjoy this, or do I feel pulled toward it? That question is powerful, because many compulsive behaviors survive in the dark gap between wanting and liking. You want the app, but you do not like how you feel after using it. You want the snack, but you do not enjoy eating past fullness. You want the outrage, but you do not like living in a state of irritation. You want the purchase, but you do not like the financial anxiety afterward. When wanting and liking repeatedly separate, pay attention. Your brain may be chasing a cue, not a value. Second, identify the cue. Do not just say, I have no discipline. That is too vague. Ask, what starts the behavior? Is it boredom, loneliness, stress, fatigue, a notification, being in bed with the phone, finishing work and feeling depleted, eating alone, feeling rejected, avoiding a task, needing a state change? A behavior you do not understand will feel like fate. A behavior you can map becomes adjustable. Third, change friction. This is boring. This is why it works. Do not rely on heroic willpower against machines designed by professionals. Add friction to the behavior you want less of. Remove the app from the home screen. Turn off non-essential notifications. Keep the phone out of the bedroom. Use website blockers. Do not store trigger foods in the most accessible place. Make gambling, shopping, scrolling, or snacking less immediate, and then reduce friction for what you want more of. Put walking shoes near the door. Prepare healthy food before you're starving. Keep books visible. Set up the work environment before the work session. Charge the phone away from the bed. Make the next good action obvious. This is not glamorous, but your environment is stronger than your motivational speeches. Fourth, replace. Do not merely remove. A common mistake is to strip away stimulation and leave a vacuum. No phone, no entertainment, no comfort food, no pleasure. Then the person sits there with stress, loneliness, fatigue, and boredom, and calls the suffering a detox. That is not a strategy. That is deprivation without design. If a behavior was regulating emotion, you need another regulation pathway. Walk, train, call someone, cook, journal, stretch. Go outside, work on something meaningful, sleep, clean your environment, listen to music intentionally, spend time with people, create something. The replacement does not need to be heroic, it needs to be real. The brain does not simply stop learning, it learns something else. Fifth, protect the fundamentals. This is where dopamine culture often becomes ridiculous. People will buy complex dopamine protocols while sleeping 5 hours, living indoors, skipping movement, eating chaotically, avoiding human connection, and working in a constant state of stress. That is not optimization, that is expensive avoidance. Your motivation does not exist in a vacuum. Sleep matters, light matters, movement matters, food quality matters, stress matters, relationships matter, purpose matters, mental health matters. If those are broken, do not expect a dopamine hack to save you. Fundamentals before hacks, always. Sixth, know when the problem is bigger than a habit. This is important. Sometimes people blame dopamine when the real issue is depression, ADHD, anxiety, substance use disorder, trauma, sleep disorder, medication side effects, burnout, or another medical or psychological condition. Not every motivational problem is a dopamine problem. Not every compulsive behavior is a character flaw, and not every solution should be self-improvement content. If your behavior feels uncontrollable, if it is damaging your life, if you cannot stop despite serious consequences, if you're using substances compulsively, if you feel depressed or unable to function, professional help is not weakness. Medical checkups are not weakness. Therapy is not weakness. Evidence-based treatment is not weakness. A better map includes humility. The internet wants to give everyone the same protocol. Real health judgment asks what is actually happening in this person, in this body, in this context. Now, let's make the distinction brutally simple. The dopamine lie says pleasure is corrupting you. Dopamine is the villain. Modern life broke your brain. Detox and become pure. The better map says your reward system is learning all the time. Environments train wanting without well-being. Some cues become stronger than your values. Some behaviors are rewarding in the moment and costly over time. You do not need dopamine purity, you need behavioral clarity. That is the shift from chemical panic to practical judgment, from shame to design, from mythology to mechanism. One of the most damaging parts of dopamine culture is that it makes normal human enjoyment suspicious. But a healthy life is not a low dopamine life. A healthy life includes desire, pleasure, excitement, anticipation, ambition, novelty, food, sex, music, beauty, challenge, victory, social connection, creative obsession. The goal is not to flatten yourself. The goal is to align your wanting with your well-being. You want a brain that can still be moved by real things. Real work, real people, real effort, real rest, real beauty, real competence, real love, real play, real achievement. The tragedy of compulsive stimulation is not that it gives you pleasure. The tragedy is that it can make shallow things feel urgent while deep things feel distant. That is the real theft, not dopamine, misallocated salience. Your brain starts tagging the wrong things as important. The notification feels urgent. The body does not. The feed feels urgent. Sleep does not. The outrage feels urgent. Peace does not. The next clip feels urgent. The project does not. The snack feels urgent. The meal does not. The fantasy feels urgent. The relationship does not. The algorithm becomes loud. Life becomes quiet. And then people say, my dopamine is broken. Maybe. Often the better sentence is, my attention has been trained against my values. That sentence gives you power back. Because attention can be retrained. Behavior can be redesigned. Friction can be changed. Cues can be removed. Values can be made visible. The environment can be rebuilt. The body can be respected without turning it into a purity project. So here is the HaleSense dopamine checklist. When you hear a dopamine claim online, ask, are they treating dopamine like a toxin? Are they reducing dopamine to pleasure? Are they implying that all stimulation is harmful? Are they confusing temporary abstinence with a biological reset? Are they selling a protocol before defining the problem? Are they ignoring sleep, stress, movement, food, relationships, and mental health? Are they making ordinary habit change sound like advanced neuroscience? Are they using shame to create urgency? Are they promising that one extreme reset will fix a pattern that your environment keeps recreating? If the answer is yes, be careful. That does not mean every piece of advice is useless. It means the map is contaminated, and contaminated maps create expensive mistakes. The final lesson is this: dopamine is not your moral enemy. It is part of how your brain learns what to pursue. So the question is not whether you can eliminate dopamine. You cannot, and you should not. The question is whether your life is teaching your brain to want what actually makes you healthier, stronger, calmer, deeper, and more capable. Because your brain is always learning. From the phone beside your bed, from the food in your kitchen, from the apps on your screen, from the people around you, from the work you avoid, from the sleep you sacrifice, from the pleasures you choose, from the discomfort you refuse, from the environment you repeat every day. You do not need to detox from dopamine. You need to stop outsourcing your reward system, systems that profit from your compulsions. That is not purity, that is sovereignty. Evidence before health mythology, mechanism before panic, design before shame, and fundamentals before hacks.